Welcome to another episode of Read All About It. I'm your host, Reed. Today we're going to break down my daughter's bow hunting setup. I've got what she used last year to take the deer in that last video, and then I have what we've gone into this year as well. We're going to break down both of them. They're both pretty similar, but there are some differences, and then we'll talk about the arrow setup as well as the broadhead and things like that, and go into a little bit of detail. So first we'll start with what she used last year, and we'll break that down. So what we have on the table here is the bow that my daughter successfully harvested her doe with last year. This is the Elite Emerge. It came out in 2017. It had two production years, 2017, 2018. This specific one is a 45-pound max limb on it, and I've got the mod set for 26 inches of draw length for my daughter. And we had the tactic sight that is on her new bow on this one, but now this has a cheaper Apex gear sight on it. This one's 5-pin. The one that she has and has been using is a 3-pin sight, which for her needs is more than adequate. She's not going to be taking any longer shots than potentially 30 yards, given her current draw weight and speeds and arrow setup and things like that. But I had a Hamskea drop away hybrid hunter rest on here for her. One thing to note on this bow is this type of rest almost didn't work because the limbs don't flex that much to actuate or allow that rest to come up, as it's a limb-driven rest. Now you can set this up as a cable-driven rest as well. So that would have been an option with this rest. I could have tied into the cable and made it work that way. It does have adjustable mods. You do need a press to be able to swap out the mods. I do have a little portable press, so I was able to take care of that for her. Because this did have, I believe, 24-inch mods on it when I first got it for my wife. And she still shoots it a little bit, which is why we kept it. And I'll have to put those 24-inch mods back on for her, as her wingspan isn't quite as big. And then just a cheaper trophy ridge, little stabilizer on there with a wrist sling for her. And then we ran a fuse for arrow quiver. And then let me grab one of her arrows so we can talk about that. So here is the arrow setup that I chose for my daughter. This is a Easton Axis long range in a 400 spine. Just got the factory Blazer fletchings on there. We did swap out the nock for the nocturnal G-nock size, because that's what fits in the 4mm diameter. And then these come with a half-out outsert system. So far it's been perfectly rigid and straight, and has worked really well, been durable. And then we topped that off with the Iron Will V100, so the vented blade 100 grain standard profile broadhead. These come out of the package really sharp, but I take them to a next level. I have a little 3D printed stay sharp jig that I can take the blade out, put it in that jig. It's going to hold it at a consistent angle. And then I go and I polish that and buff it, starting with 600 grit wet dry sandpaper. I take it all the way up to 2000 grit sandpaper, and then use some buffing compound on some like pop box like that your 12 pack of pop or adult beverages come in. On the inside, that smoother cardboard, rub some buffing compound on that, and then drag that blade across that. It buffs it up really nice, and then hit it with the leather strop, and you've got a crazy sharp broadhead. And I believe that the sharpness of your broadhead directly correlates to how quickly you put down that animal, the amount of hemorrhage that you can cause with a slightly sharper broadhead versus one that's slightly duller, can make a vast difference. Not necessarily maybe in the blood trail that you follow, as like these smaller iron wills, they don't bleed externally all that well. The blood trails aren't great, but every deer that I have shot with them hasn't needed to be blood trailed because it has died in sight. Just internally, they're hemorrhaging a lot. It cuts really, really well. Penetration is exceptional, just given the profile. That cut on contact head, and then yeah, it drives really deep. The first deer I shot with them was actually this buck here, and it was this shoulder here actually. On this shoulder mount, you can actually feel where the broadhead went in, but I, shooting an 80-pound bow at 29 inches of draw length with a 550 grain Easton Axis 260 spine arrow, and I purposefully shot for that ball joint because when I stopped him at 25 yards, he pivoted towards me about 25 degrees, and I would have had to tuck it really, 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 really tight to the backside of that to miss everything, but I probably still would have only got one lung and liver on the opposite side. So I opted to aim right for that ball joint. I hit right on that ball joint, and it made a very, very loud crack. I dislocated his shoulder and split that ball joint in half. I've got a picture of that. He carried that front shoulder for about 25 yards or so and then stopped and tipped over. The arrow did successfully pass all the way through, exiting just behind the offside armpit there, arrow buried in the dirt. Just kind of rolled one of the leading edges of the actual broadhead, otherwise was pretty much undamaged. And I sharpened it back up and still use that blade to this day. So that was kind of a testament to the integrity of the broadhead. Like I said, I hit lung tissue and a lot of major arteries coming off the top of the heart. And there was a blood trail, but it wasn't anything like some of the stuff that I had experienced with, the 2-inch, 2-blade, mechanicals that I had shot in the past. But with one of those heads, I don't think it would have made it through that bone, let alone passed through. So that's why I choose this type of a head for especially some like a youth hunter who's shooting a little bit lower poundage, and then also shorter draw length, because you just don't have as much energy, and you need as efficient of a design as possible to get the adequate penetration, and you don't know what you're going to hit when you get there. They're live animals, they're moving, they can do different things at the shot. And so, yeah, just having the appropriate broadhead, I think, is one of the most important things when you're talking about taking youth hunters bow hunting at earlier ages. the next consideration is picking out the actual bow. I opted for this Elite Emerge, like I said, because contrary to what a lot of people choose, which is something that is very widely adjustable, say it goes from 19 inches to 29 inches of draw length and from 19 pounds to 60 pounds of draw weight. That's great while your kid's growing. You don't have to invest in multiple bows every year or every other year to get something that fits them. And they're really easy to adjust. You don't need a press or anything like that to take care of those things. The trade-off with those designs is they're not nearly as efficient as they could be. You can't have both worlds. You can't have all that adjustability and then have the same kind of efficiencies at all those different draw lengths. So having a narrower band in which you can adjust the draw length makes the cam system more efficient. So I'll also show you, I've got the chronograph set up. We're going to shoot both her new bow, this bow, and then I do have the ultra adjustable type bow. And we'll set that up to comparable specs to one of these bows and shoot it so you can get a feel for that bow as well to see how efficient that is, so that you can make an educated decision on what you're going to allow your child to hunt with, or maybe even your spouse going forward. Yeah, you can save some money that way, but I've found the used market, buying and selling used bows, really isn't that hard. Between Archery Talk or potentially Facebook, and even eBay and different online retailers, it's not that hard to find a used, more premium bow for a reasonable price. And then if you do need to sell it in a year or two because your child's outgrown it, so be it. But you do still have some adjustment in those cams. If you've got 4 or 5 inches of draw length adjustment, just get the modules when you buy the bow, and you can swap them out. More and more of them, the newer ones, don't require bow presses in most cases to swap out those modules, and they're pretty easy to do. So with that said, I'm going to get her new bow up and kind of tell you why we made the upgrade and what that bow has on it. And we'll talk about that one next. So here we have Annika's new bow that I got her this last year. This is a Matthews Avail. So this is a step up even from the Elite, I would say. Cams are even more efficient. This is a 50-pound max. I've got her set up at 26.5 inches of draw length on this bow, and that seems to fit her very well. And then, like I said, we moved her CBE Tactic 3-pin sight from her Elite to this Matthews. It's just a little bit better construction. That one has like a plastic housing and things. This one's a little bit more durable, as well as toolless adjustments on everything except for the pin spacing. So a little bit easier to adjust for the old man. And then we have just a QAD, standard QAD rest. That same fuse 4-arrow quiver. And then we take the Trophy Ridge stabilizer, and that goes on here as well. I had it off because I was doing a little work on the bow, and the vise that I have mounts into the stabilizer threads there. So yeah, like I said, we made the upgrade. One, she was maxing out the 45-pound draw weight, and it really wasn't a challenge for her anymore. So upping to 50 pounds. I wish this was a 60-pound max, but a friend had it and they were willing to let it go for a good price, and wanted to help them out because they weren't going to use it anymore. Made it simple for us and them, and yeah, we were able to pick this up for a reasonable price. It's got a little bit nicer grip, overall feel, fit, finish, weight, those types of things are improved. She shoots it really, really well. With this setup, contrary to her other one, I would probably let her shoot a white-tailed deer at up to 30 yards with this, where we kind of set our limit on the other in that 20 yard, plus or minus 3 yards probably, kind of limit on her old setup. And yeah, both bows are more than adequate at killing whitetail, but this is just the next evolution, and in another year or two we'll see how much more she grows and how strong she gets. She does work out and lift, and she does like to see how much she can draw on her bow. She does a lot of pull-ups. She's got a very strong back. She can do 8 full up and down pull-ups, which is a lot better than I can do, or a lot of the boys in her high school and things can do as well. She likes to brag. If you've ever met Annika and she's talked about doing her pull-ups, she'll tell you how many of the boys she beat on the football team doing pull-ups over the summer when they were doing those maxes. But yeah, like I said, a Matthews Avail. It's a great bow. They've subsequently came out with a couple of new models since the Avail, but this was more in the price range that we wanted to get. Once she's done growing, we'll probably invest in maybe something brand new or just 1-year-old used, that she can have for several years, as technology is kind of plateauing. But it seems like in the youth/ladies market, it takes a couple years for them to bring over the technology that they're putting in the flagship lines into the ladies' bows. I don't know why they hold out on that, but things like the integrate rest and bridge lock and Hoyt's, their Picatinny mounts and all the other things, they're a little bit slower to adapt them to the lady/youth models, but hopefully in a year or two they'll add those to all those lines, and we can get that technology for relatively inexpensive as well. But what I want to do next is we're going to shoot these over the chronograph so you can get an idea of what these specs yield. And one thing to note, the arrow is 395 grains. I just weighed it. So that's 100 grain point, and then the arrow build weight. And yeah, so without further ado, let's shoot these a little bit and we'll see what we get. All right, so like I said, this here is the Elite, and with a 395 grain arrow, we'll see what velocity we get out of it. We're shooting over a Garmin Zero, and this is 26 inches of draw length. All right, so we got 214.5 on that. We'll shoot one more here. And that was 214. So we'll go ahead and swap over to the Matthews now. One thing to note on the Elite, I don't have it maxed out. It's at the weight that Annika shot her deer at. I believe it's around a little over 40 pounds. I took one full turn out of the bolt just to make sure she didn't struggle last year drawing, and was able to, if she did get the shot, that she'd be able to not have a negative experience and not being able to get her bow back, because I've seen that happen. So this one, 246.3. So same arrow, as you can see, considerably faster. And 244.4. So about a 245 average. All right, so we got the readings there. So for the elite, we had 40.18 foot-pounds of kinetic energy and 0.375 slugs of momentum. And for the Matthews here, we had 52.6 foot-pounds of kinetic energy and 0.429 slugs of momentum. My opinion is momentum is more important than kinetic energy. The reason being, you have to understand the equations and how they're derived in order to place the weighting where I think the weighting needs to be placed, which in this case is momentum. So kinetic energy, the equation is 1/2 mass times velocity squared. Okay, so we're squaring the velocity, so every foot per second faster we're going, that's making an exponential increase in that variable. And what that translates to is more energy in the system, which is great. We want as high of kinetic energy as possible, but we also want momentum as well. And momentum doesn't bias anything towards velocity, as that equation is just mass times velocity, which will give you your momentum. And that the mass is equal to the velocity, and momentum is essentially how resistant that object is to changing its motion. So once that arrow is in motion, how efficient it can be at penetrating an animal. Momentum is what creates that, because if you have high momentum, it's going to want to continue going. Just the Newton's laws of motion. An object in motion wants to stay in motion, an object at rest wants to stay at rest. So once you get that arrow moving, it wants to keep moving unless acted on by an outside force. The air drag, the drag of the animal's body, all those things want to stop the arrow, but having more momentum makes it harder to do that. It makes it harder to slow it down, and then couple that with a really, really, really sharp and really efficient designed broadhead that doesn't have too large of cutting diameter, but has enough cutting surface to effectively do the job, and then having it just wicked sharp really does the trick. I don't necessarily drink the Ranch Fairy Kool-Aid that you have to shoot 600-700 grain arrows. I think there's a balance to be struck, especially when you're shooting what a typical male can pull in draw weight and things like that. Having a relatively flat trajectory, because In long range shooting for rifles and stuff, we want heavyweight bullets because they are more efficient downrange. They carry that momentum. They are flatter shooting. In the distances and how arrows slow down and how they interact with their ballistic environment is vastly different from how supersonic bullets interact with their ballistic environment. So a lighter weight, faster arrow in the ranges that we're going to shoot archery tackle is going to be flatter trajectory and have shorter flight times, allowing an animal less time to react to a shot and things. Since we are subsonic, the noise of our bow going off and the arrow flying at it are all going to reach that animal before the arrow gets there, gives them an opportunity to react, as well as just, light travels even faster than that. So if they catch movement of, your bow going off or you drawing or taking a shot, whatever, all those things allow that animal to react before your arrow gets there. Conversely, when you're rifle hunting, almost always you're going to be in supersonic flight. I don't know of anyone that hunts past the transonic zone or should hunt past that. So in those cases, the animal isn't going to react because the sound of the bullet, the sound of the gun going off, all of those things aren't going to reach that animal even if it's 100 yards away before the bullet actually gets there, because the bullet is traveling at multiple times the speed of sound. So those are all things to consider when you're setting up a lower poundage, shorter draw length youth or female, or potentially a handicapped archer, or just somebody who may not have the strength to pull 60, 70, 80 pounds of draw weight. So those are things to consider if you are on those lower end specs. Just do the right thing and set yourself up for success with the right equipment. There's a couple key things to put into your system to give yourself the best opportunity for success to ethically harvest that animal, put it down in a quick, clean manner, so that you can sleep easy at night. We've all been there, where you think you didn't make a good shot and you had to wait longer than you wanted to go recover your animal. But if you take a few considerations from this video, I would say sharpen your broadhead, cut on contact design. It doesn't have to be an iron will. I know iron wills are pretty expensive broadheads, but there's a lot of good designs anymore for cut on contact. Whether it's a G5 Montech, a Q80 Exodus, Magnus Stingers, there's a lot of different ones. But just when you take those out of the package, do yourself a favor, sharpen them up. Brand new broadheads, while they are sharp enough to kill an animal in almost all circumstances, they could be sharper. A 3-pack of the iron wills are $100, and I still take the blade out and I sharpen it up. That is one thing that Ranch Fairy does preach, and it's one thing that I would preach as well. Then on a lower poundage bow, a little heavier grain arrow to get your momentum a little bit higher, and then spend time tuning the bow with the person who's going to be shooting it. Shoot it through paper. The biggest things that are going to rob penetration are untrue arrow flight, first and foremost, and then with the exception being if your arrow were to, and or broadhead were to break on impact, that's going to detrimentally affect your penetration capabilities. And then, they talk about front of center weight as well. What you're seeing there is we have a shaft here that's, it's rigid, but it's also flexible. So what you want is you want the even more rigid components, the broadhead and the insert or outsert, depending on what arrow you have, being heavy enough and so that this is what's doing the driving, versus if you had mass back here, this is where your momentum is going to be located then. Right here is where the concentration of momentum is on a heavy FOC arrow. So if your momentum is back here, when the point of your arrow hits something that wants it to slow down and stop, you're going to experience flexing in the shaft because this is going to want to keep moving forward. And yes, it will ultimately drive the broadhead further into the animal, but not as efficiently as if the weight was up here, because every time that this shaft flexes, you're losing energy to friction, okay? Just those fibers bending creates friction within the system, and that creates heat. Heat is energy loss, okay? And so you have the friction of just, whatever material you're going through trying to slow down the arrow. We don't need to be losing it to flexing of the shaft. So those are considerations. Relatively high FOC, and then a good cut-on contact broadhead, and then tune your arrow flight. Paper tune your bow with the person who's actually going to be shooting the bow. For me, I can get a bow shooting a perfect bullet hole, and I can hand it to somebody next to me, and they get a right or a left tear. A lot of that can be down to how they grip the bow or the amount of facial pressure they're putting on the string. All those types of things affect how that bow is going to shoot for that individual person. So take the time, have it tuned for them. There's things that you can do to their form to make it easier to tune and more repeatable, and work on those things too. Getting that arrow flight perfectly in line so that it's going to drive through the animal. As you saw, Annika got a perfect pass through, all the way through the animal, right tight to the shoulder, hit rib on both sides. Still got that pass through with 215 feet per second with a 395 grain arrow and a good cut-on contact broadhead. It's a recipe for success, and 20 yards or so, no problem taking a whitetail. So I'll leave you with that stuff. If you found this entertaining and or educational, please go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions about the setups or want to pick my brain about any of that type of stuff, by all means, I'm happy to help you out. Love getting new hunters and shooters involved in the outdoors. Even if you're just a new bow hunter in general, you're not a youth, not a woman, whatever, these things may or may not apply, but there's something you could probably take away from all of it. Happy to reach out and happy to help you through your journey. In the meantime, though, keep on keeping on, and we'll see you on the next one.